Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm-fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. Okay, so picture this. It's a cold, grey June morning. We're talking Southern Australia, Northern Hemisphere, North America, Canada. You've dragged yourself out of bed, sun's not even up, your feet are freezing, coffee's still on the stove boiling like you haven't had your first cup yet, and you head out to the coop because you need eggs. You lift the nesting box lid and you look inside and there is nothing, absolutely nothing, not even a present of a little poo in the corner from that random hen that always shits in the nest. You stand there in the dark in a dressing gown or your daggy ass farm jumper and you think, what the actual F? I fed them, I've watered them, I built them in a nicer house than the kids have, which in my case, it's pretty close, and they're not giving you anything. Sound familiar? You are not alone. Your chickens are not broken and nobody is going on a hunger strike. Welcome to winter in the Southern Hemisphere, friend. It's CJ here from Mojo Homestead, and today on Ditch the Store we are getting into why our girls have clocked off and what on earth a molt actually is, and most importantly what you can do about it. So let's get into it. Before we do, a couple of housekeeping things. If you're not on my email list, jump on. That's where I will notify of anything coming up first. You can go to www.mojohomestead.net, or there'll be a link in the show notes. And I've got some stuff coming up soon, particularly in regards to chickens that you may want to be on the list for. So it involves eggs and it'll cover everything. Just be on the mailing list so you know first, because my mailing list people will definitely get advised in advance of everybody else. And the other thing I was going to say was, everybody send your good thoughts to the handy helper. On Friday night, the handy helper was driving home from work with his son in the car and he hit a very large kangaroo, and our Volvo XC90, yes, we were Volvo drivers and we're not scared to admit it. Our Volvo XC90, which was my car for 4 years and has been the handy helper's car for the last 4 years, and was going to be passed on to MJ because she is driving on her L's at the moment, and we were going to give it to her to be her first P car. He hit a roo and we've taken it in, and it looks like it's going to be a write-off, which is not ideal. I mean, we've got the Land Cruiser, which the handy helper's been trying to get back on the road, and now is a really good opportunity for him to get it back on the road. And he's off at the moment doing things, getting repairs and getting equipment that he needs to do that. But it's kind of sad because the XC90 had done us we'd had it for at least 8 years, and it was a car that just wouldn't die. Everything that went wrong with it was so easily fixed and so repairable, and sadly, it looks like it's going to be written off by the insurance company. So MJ won't be getting that to drive. My old Nissan Pathfinder, when it gets a new motor in it, probably will go to her, because I'm currently driving a Toyota RAV4, which is amazing and I love it. And the handy helper will go back to his Land Cruiser and his motorbike for work. So, yeah. But send him good thoughts, because he was pretty disappointed that he hit the roo. We try and avoid them. Nobody wants to hit a roo. I know there are people out there that do hit them and don't care. We just don't have the money to repair cars like that. So we will try and avoid them at every possible chance. And the handy helper's actually getting me some shoe roos today to put on to the front of my car, because coming into this dark period of winter, and I'm always leaving in the dark and always coming home in the dark when I am at work, it's really hard to avoid the roos. So we want to do everything we can. Anyway, why chickens stop laying in winter? The short answer is it's the light, not the cold. And most people think, it's winter, that's why they stop laying. It's not that. So chickens are photoperiod animals. They respond to daylight length, not temperature. So if you live in closer to the equator and your daylight length is more even, you might find that you don't get significant molts with your chickens. For people that live, say, in the very southern parts of Australia, like in Tasmania, where, daylight hours in the middle of winter might be 4 or 5 hours, you will get a significant molt from your chickens. And we certainly here, we are probably only getting about 8 hours light a day, tops, like from the time the sun is peaking over the hill. Max amount of sunlight hours we're getting out of a 24-hour period is about 8 hours. And so when the daylight drops below 14 hours a day, the pituitary gland in the ovaries, in the chicken, tell it to ease off. So egg production is, because it's hormonally driven, same as in mammals and women and cows, goats, all the rest of it. Although at the moment we have a goat screaming in the paddock because she is in season and it's June in the southern tablelands. She's last year's girl, so she's too young to be in kid anyway. But because of my broken leg, none of our goats are in kid this year. So egg production is hormonally driven and light is the trigger. So in the southern hemisphere, you'll find that around February, March, when the daylight hours really start to drop off. But by June, July, which is winter solstice, you will find just about all chickens will be absolutely on strike. They won't be laying. They'll either have stopped completely or they'll be laying very randomly sporadic eggs. And that is perfectly normal. It's actually part of the natural cycle. So it's not the cold that stops them laying, although hens are burning more energy to stay warm, and therefore there's less energy available for egg production. So sometimes even without a molt, they will slow down a bit. So for people that are maybe in the northern parts of Australia where it's a bit colder and the daylight hours are a little bit less, but not hugely less, you will still find that egg production might drop off just a little bit over that winter. Now, for northern people, you might only get a 4-week molt. For the rest of us, we might get a fairly lengthy molt. We're getting a fairly lengthy molt this year. All of our girls are of an age where their molting cycle is going to be a bit more extended. We don't have any new flock. We will be getting new flock this year. Stress can also add to that shutdown, and so changes in the flock, which is at the moment there are chickens available everywhere where I live, and I will not be purchasing any because I don't want to make those changes while my girls are going through the molt. Any kind of stressful change to a flock of birds can just extend that molt, and I really don't want to extend it. We want eggs. I'm back on my carnivore diet. I'm currently doing a sardine challenge for a couple of days to really reset my system. And I need my eggs. I love my eggs, and I've had to go and buy eggs from the store. My freeloaders have forced me to buy eggs from the store, and they're just not the same as my eggs. They don't taste as good. So changes in feed, any kind of predator scares, any changes to their coop arrangements or their flock can add to the stress, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. So for the southern hemisphere people, and for northern hemisphere, just reverse it completely, 6 months to the other side of the year. March, April, days start to shorten and your production of eggs might start to drop. May, June, you'll get a full slowdown or a total shutdown for many hens, and we'll talk about why. June, July, dead of winter, the nesting box will look like a crime scene. There'll be nothing in there. August, September, light is starting to come back. And literally, winter solstice for me, I'm recording this. What day is it today? God, it's the 16th. Winter solstice for us here in the Southern Hemisphere is the 21st of June, so only a couple of days away. And once we get past that, our days will start to extend and get a bit longer. And so then hopefully my girls, if I do everything right, which I'll talk about in a minute, my girls will come back with a vengeance and start laying eggs wonderfully. September and October, your eggs should be absolutely back on again and life should be good. Now, for some people, that molt period and no laying period might only be 4 weeks. But for other people, depending on how far down south you are, depending on how old your birds are, I have a lot of older birds out there at the moment, their molt period can, instead of being 4 weeks for a very young hen, can extend right out to the 16-week mark if they're really struggling. And birds like Agnes, who is 9 years old now, coming up to 9 years old. Her molt period, I mean, she only lays 1 egg a week kind of thing. So her molt period is probably going to be the full 16 weeks. So if you're listening in June, July to this and not later in the year, this is your problem. It's the molt. Your chooks haven't quit on you. They're just on annual leave. And that's not a bad thing. So what is a molt and why does it happen? Molting is an annual process where hens shed old feathers and grow a new set. So they will look scrappy. It happens to hens once they get, and it'll happen to roosters as well. We've got roosters up there and they molt at the same time as the hens. Happens to your mature hens, so past 18 months. So your Isa Browns within that first 12-month period generally won't molt. They might have a little bit of a molt. You might see a few missing feathers. They might go off the lay for like a week, but they generally will pull through it. Pullets, once they get past their first year, that's when you kind of have to keep an eye out for a molt period. But once they're past that 18-month period, they will have a full molt during that winter cycle. And it's triggered by the daylight hours. So as soon as the daylight hours change, their body says, nah, we're on annual leave, we're having a break. And it's basically, they're not making eggs, so they use the downtime to replace their feathers. And that means they still need a lot of nutrients. Now, it does look alarming. The first time I've had people post to me and go, my chicken looks like this, what's wrong with it? And it will just be scrappy. Their feathers are 85% protein. It's keratin, which I think is the same as what we have in our fingernails. It's kind of similar protein. I'm not a biology major, so, spare me on that one. But they basically grow a whole new coat. And nutritionally, their body has to redirect the resources away from egg laying to reproduce all those feathers. And there's a lot of work in that and a lot of protein goes towards that. Now, molting hens look absolutely terrible, and that's why I've had people send me photos and go, what's wrong with my hen? They look scrappy. Their feathers, literally, they can lose all of their feathers. Most of them won't lose all of their feathers in one go, but I've seen chooks that have pretty much look like bald chickens as their feathers are coming through. And you feel so sorry for them because it's the dead of winter and the poor bastards have got no feathers. But they're not sick. They're just going through a release of all their feathers and a regrowth. Now, the molt pattern, where it usually starts, is around the head and the neck, and then it goes to the breast and the body. So usually it will kind of filter through their body instead of all of their feathers falling out in one hit. Breast and body, then their wings, and then their back and tail. And we always laugh because when our roosters go through the molt, their tail feathers go, and they look so dismal. They walk around, and normally they have these beautiful, plumage of feathers out of their tail, and instead they have nothing, and they look like a hen, walking around the yard. So I did say before, it can take 4 weeks for a really young hen, but 6 to 16 weeks is kind of normal for an older hen. The younger hens will molt harder and fast, so you might find that they seem to lose almost all of their feathers in one hit, but they'll grow them then back within that 4-week period. Older hens can drag it out. And like I say, Agnes is nearly 9 and she will probably be in the molt period for 16 weeks. In fact, I'll be surprised if she keeps laying after this molt cycle. We might put her aside and see if she's still laying. Normally she lays like a olive green egg now, so it's easy to find when it's hers. But yeah, 9 years old, I wouldn't be surprised if she stops. And I mean, we're not a commercial eggery hatchery, so I don't care. She'll stay because she's one of my favourites. She's not going anywhere. If she was an Isa Brown, she'd probably not be staying, but she can stay. She's the matriarch of the paddock and she will stay. So a fast, hard molt is usually the markings of a very productive hen or a hen that's about to go back into egg laying pretty quickly and pretty full on. So your Isa Browns. A slow, gradual molt is usually an older hen or a lower production hen, so a bird that doesn't tend to lay as many eggs. Now, breed does matter when it comes to this. We've got Brahmas, Isa Browns and Araucans up there, and this year I'm looking to get Australorps to add to that. The Brahmas, because they're a bigger bird, and have a lot of feathers. They've got the fluffy feet and all the rest of it. When they molt, it can be quite dramatic. And honestly, they look so scrappy at the moment. They're not the prettiest of hens right now. High production birds like Isa Browns can have a lighter molt because they tend to go straight back into that egg laying cycle. The Araucans kind of sit somewhere in the middle. They look scrappy. Their molt isn't quick. It's a little bit extended, but they will go back in a bit quicker than the Brahmas. But just remember, even a light molt will stop the chicken laying. So don't be fooled by a hen that hasn't lost all its feathers and seems to have got through the molt really quick. It still probably won't be laying eggs until it gets right through that cycle. Now, one thing you do have to consider is your bird sick or molting? Because, a sick bird can lose feathers too. So it's really important to know the difference. It's one of those things where if you've got a sick bird, you really do need to segregate them and keep them away from the rest of the flock, because whatever they've got may be contagious. It might be something they can pass on. And you won't know that. We're not vets. We're just farmers. We're just chicken owners. So from that perspective, we won't know what is wrong unless you're prepared to take it to the vet and get it tested or whatever, which we don't do. We segregate, we monitor, we check, we try and work it out ourselves. But sick or molting. So molting, feather loss starts in the head and neck. They're otherwise alert, eating, drinking, and moving around normally. I mean, they look scrappy, but the flock behaviour is identical to what it is in the summer months when they're not molting. There's still pecking order going on. They're still eating. They're still drinking. We take scraps up, and they still all go crazy for the scraps. Sick is the feather loss plus lethargic, not eating, floppy or discoloured combs, watery or green droppings, that might be worms, sitting hunched or separated from the flock. Flock birds tend to take themselves off if they're not feeling well. If they're not 100%, they won't kind of hang out with the other chickens, because chickens can be horrible. If there's a sick bird, they will pick on the sick bird. So a molting hen, though, may be a bit quieter and may not want to be handled. Now, there's a reason for this, and we have no evidence of it. We can't ask a chicken, but there is some suggestion that the pin feathers, so when the feathers grow back through, you'll see just a little like nodule of feather coming back through the skin. There is some suggestion that can be a bit sensitive on their skin and a little bit painful to touch. So she may not want to be picked up. She may not want to be handled very much while that process is going on. Once the feathers come through, then obviously it's covering the skin again. They're not as sensitive. The feathers are doing their job, protecting the chicken's skin. But she still should be bright-eyed and engaged, even if she doesn't want to be touched. So what do chickens need when they're in that molt period? And this is the really important bit. I've heard people go, I'm just going to cut back on feed because they're not laying eggs. It's probably the worst thing you can do in that molt period. The molt period is the time to give them the boost and help them get through it. Making feathers is hard work, same as making eggs. So you need to make sure they're getting enough protein. So you can't make the sun stay up longer, although I will talk about artificial light in a sec. You can't make the sun stay up longer, but you can absolutely give them what they need to get through that period so that they come back and lay strong. So I mentioned before that feathers are 85% protein. If they don't have enough protein, the molt can drag out and new feathers don't grow as well. So make sure you keep up that high protein food, the same as what you feed them when they're in egg production. During the molt, look for, you can up the protein. So you can look for one that's closer to 20%. Most standard layer pellets sit around that 16, but you can up it if you think they're struggling to get through that molt cycle. We don't. We stay with our normal layer pellets, but we do sometimes give them some extra additives. So mealworms, corn, chicken candy, the stuff that we wouldn't normally give them, we sometimes give them that during the molt period just to encourage them to keep going. Check the nutritional information on your feed bag to make sure that the crude protein percentage is there. During the molt is not the time to have a low protein food. The food that I prefer, sorry, just needed a sip of coffee then. So my favourite brands are Barrostock, or I can never pronounce this correctly, Lacu Mills, something like that. as a good quality feed. Barrow-stock is really good. A little bit expensive, but it's a good one. A red hen is good for your chicken candy. They do a good scratch mix. And what's the other one? Lucky Layer is the other one that we use. So what else have I got here? So do that. High protein supplements. I've got a list of them here because there are some things that are really good for them. And the important bit here is that there's a couple of things that you would have in your cupboard and they're really easy to just do. So dried mealworm, probably need to buy that one. They love them. They're like chicken candy as well, so they will scoff them, but they're really high in protein. Black soldier fly larvae, you can buy that from pet stores and farm supplies. It's used for also feeding, I think, lizards and things like that, so pet lizards and stuff like that, but really good for chickens. Sardines or tuna in spring water, not in brine, too salty for them, but in spring water, a couple times a week, it can be a real boost for them. And I bought, before I started my sardine challenge to, reset my fucking sugar intake, I bought some sardines in spring water that were really cheap from Aldi, and they're crap. They're horrible. They're like mush. So I ended up going and buying more expensive sardines because, if I'm just going to be eating sardines, I want the good quality ones. So the cans that I've got in the cupboard, I am going to feed to the chickens to try and give them a little bit of a boost. Cooked eggs. Having cooked eggs, I know it's counterproductive that you're not getting eggs and you're going and buying eggs to feed cooked eggs to your chickens, but it works. It's a real boost for them. It's got all the nutrients that we need, and it certainly has all the nutrients they need. So cooked eggs are really good to feed back to them. And you can feed them with the shell, like you just crush them up, even with the shell, and you don't need to peel them. Hemp seeds are really good for protein and they have the right fatty acids for feather quality. So just say, because we used to cook with weird kind of non-gluten-y things. So I think I had hemp seeds in the cupboard at one point and they are probably stale. So that's a good time to clean out the cupboard. Things like nuts, crush them up so that they're not choking on them. But nuts, anything that you've got in the cupboard that's old, gone a bit stale, chickens will devour it. Now, I did make a note here, even though we give our chickens scratch mix, that is to promote them to want to eat kind of thing, to try and get them eating. Corn and wheat are actually relatively low in protein and very high in carbs. So feeding a lot of scratch mix to hens at any time of the year isn't really going to help them. But a handful of scratch mix in the afternoon can sometimes be a little bit of a pet for them because they do like their corn. It's like chicken candy. We keep saying it. It's chicken candy. And I always say to people, don't feed them scratch mix, feed them layer pellets. Like use scratch mix as a treat to get them back into the pen or things like that. So shelter and warmth for Australian winters. A molting hen is literally missing some of her insulation because her feathers are gone. So she's going to be more vulnerable to the cold. So make sure this is the perfect time to make sure that your coop is draft free, because a cold draft at a bird level is more harmful than cold temperature. God, I can't say that. Lost my speech then. So block gaps, but allow ventilation higher up just so that it doesn't get that nasty kind of ammonia smell in there from the poop. Make sure it's dry, so make sure you've put good quality bedding in there and make sure you keep it clean as well. Make sure that the roosting hens can get together on the perch. Because what they'll do is when they're molting and they're losing their feathers, they will bunch up to conserve heat. So they'll cuddle up to each other basically to keep the heat going. In summer, I notice my girls space themselves out a lot more to allow a little bit of airflow between them, but in winter they all shuffle together. Water management. Hens drink less in cold water because they're eating less as well. But in very cold regions, just be mindful that your water troughs if you've got little water feeders, spouts, can freeze overnight. So it's really important to check because they still need their fresh water. So it's really important to check that it's not frozen because when they get up in the morning, at some point they're going to want water. And if the nipple is frozen on your water feeder or in your trough, then that's not good for them. So what not to do. And I did mention a couple of these before, but there are some beginner mistakes that you can make that can make the whole situation worse and make it last a bit longer. And I've made some of these mistakes. So this is, from the mistakes being made, don't make my mistakes. Stressing the flock out during the molt. So it's already a physical stressful time for the birds. Adding things like rearranging coop, moving them, handling them a lot, adding new flock in, that's going to be bad for them. New hens cause disruption in the pecking order, more fighting, more stress, longer molt. So it's better to wait till everybody's back to normal before you add your new hens in, or before you make any permanent or big changes to your coop environment. So don't put new nesting boxes in, don't change the layout, we move ours, but when they're not laying, they're and during winter they're not doing as much damage, there's not as much grass growth, so we move them, but we move them not as often through winter. In their chicken tractor, we've actually given them a slightly larger yard so that we didn't have to move them. Cutting back on feed to save money while they're not laying might make logical sense, but it actually is counterproductive to what you want. You actually want to be feeding them a good quality high protein so that they come out the other side of the molt really healthy and ready to go with their egg laying again. It's going to make their feathers stronger, it's going to make their bodies stronger, it's going to make them lay better eggs. Now, artificial lighting, this is the big one. We don't do it. Okay, so artificial lighting is used by commercial hatcheries to extend the daylight hours through the winter period so that the chickens never go through a molt. And when I say never, in a commercial environment, you want chickens to just keep laying continuously and not have that molt period. And that's because you are making money off the eggs that they're producing. So obviously you don't want them to have downtime. You want them to continue to lay. I have no problem with that in a commercial setting. If you're a commercial egg farmer, have at it. That's the way it is. For me, I am not at that level. That's not my concern to have that continuous egg supply and never have a gap. Having an artificial light in a coop will produce eggs through winter. It will reduce the molt period. But what I don't like about it is you're overriding the natural rest cycle of the hens. And I believe, and I'm no vet, this is just my personal belief, having had chickens for, over 10 years now myself, but also growing up with chickens, on my parents' farm, that they need that downtime, the annual leave period. That's what we'll call it, the annual leave period. They need that annual leave period in order to come out the other side ready to lay eggs and healthier and happier, and they've gone through a natural kind of cycle. I don't like doing it artificially. So for a backyard flock, I think the molt is definitely worth letting happen. I think your hens will come back stronger and happier and healthier going into the next year of laying. If you're relying on eggs heavily, you might live in an area where you cannot get eggs. There are farms in Australia where they don't get grocery supplies once a week. They get grocery supplies once a month. So if they were relying on eggs as a source of food, they might have to be in that situation where they're doing artificial light to keep the egg production going. If you're doing that, have at it. That's on you, and I don't have a problem. There's no judgment either way. It depends on your particular circumstances. But I think if you can afford to give them that molt period, it's worth doing to let them have that natural annual leave section of their life so that they can come out the other side happy, healthy, and ready to go again. Now, when to worry, because everybody worries coming out of the molt. And certainly, this year our girls have had a very extended molt. I think it's been about 2 months since we got an egg. So we're at the 8-week mark and we still could have another 4 weeks to go, I think. The molt does look alarming the first time you see it. And so some people do get a little bit freaked out. So losing feathers is normal molt behaviour. Quieter than usual, not lethargic, but quieter and not as active as what they are when they're in full egg laying mode is normal. Less interested in being handled. Remember what I said about there is some studies and some proof to indicate that the pin feathers coming through can be a little bit sensitive or painful for chickens, so they may not want to be handled. So even a chicken that would normally jump up on your lap and be quite cuddly may not want to be. Not laying or significantly reduced laying, that's completely normal in a molt cycle. Still eating, drinking, moving around and showing an interest in the world. If you take scraps up or chicken candy up and throw it to them and they all come running and eat, your chickens are just in a molt period. They're not sick. That's all good. You're good. The red flags, when to either investigate yourself like we do, or if you are in a situation where you would rather call a vet, then these are the things to think about. So the red flags are completely lethargic, sitting hunched up and separated from the flock. That's not a normal molt behaviour. Not eating or drinking for more than a day. So if you go and throw chicken candy and there's a bird that sits off to the side and doesn't come over to get the chicken candy or the scraps, then that's probably an indication that that bird is sick, not molting. Diarrhea, especially green or watery droppings. Now when we go into the molt cycle, we generally worm, and coming out of the molt cycle into spring, I will again go up and check, and if they look like they need worming, I will worm again. I find that that's a really good time to kind of flush their system out while they're on that off time from laying. And mentally, in my mind, I think I'd rather give them the worm stuff when they're not laying eggs and I'm not consuming those eggs. Combs that are pale, blue tinged, dramatically floppy, they've lost their brightness, their redness. They might look like they've got sores on them or things like that. That is a sick bird. That's not a molt bird. Feather loss with visible mites. And this is another time for us during winter. Mites tend to breed less in winter here because it's colder. So this is a perfect time for us to treat our birds for lice, to make sure that they come out the other side into spring with as low a lice load as possible and a low worm load as possible. So then they come out into spring really healthy. Sneezing, rattling or laboured breathing is a respiratory issue. It's not a molt. There should be no respiratory issues with a molt. Significant weight loss so that you can feel the keel bone when you pick them up. So if you can feel, when you do pick them up, if you can feel bones and they've really got not much breast meat on them, then that's probably a sign that the bird is sick and not molting. As a general rule, molting hen looks terrible but acts normal. That's the way I look at it. A sick hen may look terrible but doesn't act normal. And if they don't act normal, trust your gut. It's your birds. You know them better than I do. If they don't look like they're acting normal, then maybe segregate and keep an eye on them and check. Now, mites and lice do love a molting hen. The feather loss gives them easier access to the skin, which is where they bite. So it's a good time to do a routine check on your flock and make sure, particularly check around the wing feathers, neck feathers. If you can see lice, and you'll know if you've got lice. Honestly, it's a horrible feeling. If you pick up a bird and you have your hand on them for a period of time, that the lice, even though they don't stay on humans and they won't bite humans, they can cause some irritation. Some people have a reaction to them, but you'll feel them crawling on your hand, which is the worst feeling in the world. And Handy Helper and I both have been up there when we've had bad lice periods. We've been up there, deloused all the birds, and then we come straight down and we're in the shower, all our clothes are off and straight in the washing machine. It's a horrible feeling like you've got lice on you. I crawl for days afterwards if the birds have had a lice period. And I have to wash my hair like every day for 3 days in a row because I keep thinking, oh God, no, don't tell me the lice are on me. So check for lice while they haven't got a lot of feathers on. It's much easier to check and you'll be able to see them really easily. Now, what to expect when they come back? You've fed them, you've left them alone, you've let them have their annual leave, you resisted the urge to march out there and demand, eggs because you know that they're in their molt. But what happens next? So after winter solstice, so for us, 21st of June here, the days will start to lengthen. So we will start to get more sunlight hours each day. Now, we may not get sunlight hours as such because we're still in winter going through July, but the days will start to lengthen gradually. Now, as those days lengthen, some hens will respond to that extra light and their hormonal system will start to ramp back up and eggs will start to happen. By August, you should be getting eggs off all of your chickens. If you're not getting eggs, it may be that that chicken's got to that age where they're running out of eggs. And they do, they only have so many eggs to lay and they do run out. And, you know, Agnes, who's 9, like I say, if she stops laying, so be it. That's not a problem. And you have to make that decision about whether or not to keep chickens that are not productive and not laying or whether to dispatch them. Now, you can dispatch them, and if you are completely frugal like us and they're a healthy fat bird, you can dispatch them and use them for food because that's what they're intended for. If you don't want to do that, you have the choice of either keeping them and letting them be freeloaders. You know, if they've done you well over the years, like Agnes has, then let them be a freeloader. Otherwise, there are other sources you can use if you don't want to do that. If you've got a zoo nearby, now, and this will offend some people, and you know what? Harden the fuck up. If you've got a zoo nearby, they will take chickens to feed to the animals in the zoo. So that's a good option if you are not of the persuasion of dispatching your own chickens, or advertise a marketplace. You'd be surprised. I think when we lived, well, it might have been when we were still in town, and there was a guy advertising and said he will take excess chickens or chickens that are no longer productive and laying, no questions asked. Which meant that he was dispatching them, and you know, more power to him. He was using animals that are meant for our food and nutrition, and he was using them for that purpose. And he was taking that element of stress off people who couldn't do it themselves. And no judgment on people that can't do it themselves. If you can't do it yourselves, find somebody else who can. That's the simple answer. If you can't afford to keep non-productive hens. If you can afford to keep non-productive hens, well, no judgment there either. You keep the non-productive hens like I'm doing with Agnes and let them live out the rest of their days in glory. But they should be laying again by August. And by September and October, you should be ramped up into full egg production by then. So whatever you're getting in September and October, that would be what your normal production is going to be. Now, first year layers versus older hens. And like I say, we have no first year layers up there at the moment. In our yard, we are all older hens. So first year layers will do a molt usually very quickly and go right back to laying. And they get in there much quicker than other hens. Some of them won't even do a full molt. They'll continue to lay and they might just lose a few feathers around the neck, but they'll do a full lay right through winter, depending on their age when they started, like when they first started laying eggs, depending on whether it was summer, winter, whatever. Older hens, so anything 2 years and over, usually will do a full molt every year. So every year in that winter period, they will go into a full molt. And certainly all of our girls who are older, what we have up there now, are all doing that. Our Brahmas didn't molt last year because they weren't quite laying. They were right on the cusp of laying in winter. This year they have molted and they have stopped laying. But what you have to remember is as every year after the molt, the older your hens get, the slower the production will be. So they will gradually be less prolific with their egg laying. And that goes for Isa Browns as well. Once they get through their first molt, they'll drop off a little bit on production. Once they get through their second molt, they'll drop off again a little bit more on production. But you should still be getting eggs. Chickens, depending on the breed, can live up to 10, I think. I think the oldest one, I remember reading someone was 15 years old, which is a really old friggin' chicken, and probably wasn't laying anymore. But certainly, you know, Agnes, like I say, she's nearly 9 and she still lays once a week, once a fortnight, she'll still lay an egg. So we'll see how she comes out the other side of this molt, whether she's still doing that. Now, good luck for when September comes, because when September comes, you will be sitting there going, opening your coop lids and going, yes, we've got eggs. And it is really satisfying. I mean, anybody who's had chickens, you know, we joke about that first egg when you go out and collect your first egg. It's a real buzz to go out there. And if you've got kids in particular, my 2 kids, the first time they were exposed to chickens when we had them at our little farm, when we sent them out to collect eggs, they were so excited, came running out. Oh my God, we've got eggs. Handy helper and I knew there were eggs in there. We'd heard the chickens lay that day because they do their little cluck and dance and song afterwards to let us know that they've laid an egg. But we left the eggs in there so that the kids could find them when they got home, because it was a real buzz that first time. And at first, second, third, I still get a buzz. When they come back after the molt, I still get a buzz when they start laying again. But let them have that seasonal rhythm. If you can, let them have their annual leave, because they will come back stronger. All right, so that's it. That's everything I've got to talk about. Don't feel bad if your chickens aren't laying. My chickens aren't laying either. I had to go and buy chicken eggs. I can't believe it. Ditch the store and I'm in there buying a tray of friggin' eggs, freeloaders. Anyway, remember that. Feed them up. Look after the lice and worm loads during this winter period. Make sure that they're healthy. As they come out of the molt, you will start getting eggs again and you will love them. Winter does not last forever, so don't panic. Lots of protein for them. A little bit of chicken candy, corn and scratch mix, but not a whole lot of it. They don't need it. It's more as a treat. Get through the winter period. If you have to go and buy eggs, go and buy eggs. Like we did, as embarrassing as it is, when I'm preaching ditch the store and I'm still buying friggin' eggs. Bloody chickens. We will be getting new chickens this year. I'm going to get day-old Australorps and try and add some Australorps. I wasn't impressed with the Isa Browns overall. Most of my Isa Browns have either keeled over or are just not laying. They're nearly... they might be 3 years old this season. Yeah, in which case the fact that they're still alive is probably a miracle. But I'm probably going to go to Australorps this year because we will get back into production. August, I'll usually start looking to get day olds because that way by the time they're ready to go, it's right smack in the middle of spring, summer. Now, the book is coming, and that's why I say get on the wait list. Eggs Without Cartons is the next book in the series. I already have From Brooder to Plate, which is Brooder to Plate. For those that are watching on YouTube, that is the book. I'll hold it where it doesn't want to. There we go. It didn't want to kind of focus on it. The camera's struggling. Brooder to Plate was the first book. Eggs Without Cartons will be the second book. Eggs Without Cartons is all about keeping chickens in your backyard or small farm for the purpose of eggs. With Brooder to Plate was keeping meat birds. So it will be coming out. You need to be on the wait list if you want to be first to be notified when that does come out. Links that I've mentioned will be in the show notes. And other than that, I will see you all next week and after winter solstice, I was going to talk about fermenting next week, but I might talk about Yule and winter solstice first and then talk about fermenting. Anyway, bye for now. Talk next week. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojohomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.